The British royal family has been called upon to help smooth over relations between the UK and the US. King Charles has invited Donald Trump for an unprecedented second state visit to the United Kingdom. And a few days later, the monarch was having tea with President Zelenskyy. How far can King Charles go in helping with diplomacy? And should he even be interfering in politics? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, King Charles has found himself at the centre of world politics as the UK looks to the royal family to help build bridges. An invite to Donald Trump for a state visit was supposed to pave the way in mending relations with the US. But the row between Trump and Zelenskyy at the White House has put the monarch in a difficult position. So, can King Charles act as a peacekeeper?
It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter.
Donald Trump is set to be given a formal state visit for a second time. His first back in 2019 under the late Queen Elizabeth II.
That is really nice. I must make sure his signature's on that.
It's a strategic move from Starmer, knowing the US president's affection for the royal family and its grand traditions.
This is really special. This has never happened before. This is unprecedented. And I think that just symbolises the strength of the relationship between us.
Just days later, a far less cordial visit to the White House.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
After the tense clash, Zelenskyy arrived in the UK to a warmer reception. European leaders rallied around the Ukrainian leader at a summit to discuss continuing military aid and bringing peace to the region. Then there was tea with King Charles at Sandringham, his Norfolk estate, in a move to help smooth international diplomatic relations. The monarch met Zelenskyy for nearly an hour. King Charles has previously expressed its support for Ukraine and condemned Russia's actions, calling them indescribable aggression. Unlike Queen Elizabeth II, Charles is more vocal on global issues. However, as the British monarch, he is required to remain politically neutral, a principle that has been cornerstone of the monarchy for centuries. The 76-year-old king walks a fine line. How can he help international diplomacy without being seen as overstepping his constitutional role?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Glasgow is Sean McDonald. He's a Scottish broadcaster, and I'm delighted to say here with me in the studio we have Afua Hagan, who's a journalist and broadcaster, and the royal editor, Sarah Hewson. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Sarah, this is quite a delicate path for King Charles to walk along, isn't it? He is obviously King of the United Kingdom, King of Canada, and now Trump comes into the mix with this second visit. How's Charles going to handle this?
Yeah, this is really interesting because one of the concerns that was raised about King Charles before he became monarch was whether or not he was going to be able to avoid meddling in politics. And he made it very clear that he knew the line and that it was different as the Prince of Wales to the King. Here we have him now being employed effectively by the politicians to play a pivotal role in international relations and diplomacy. So when Sir Keir Starmer went over to the White House and, that vitally important meeting for UK-US relations, what was his masterstroke? It was the letter signed by King Charles inviting President Trump for not one, but two visits to the United Kingdom, a state visit and a preamble to that, an informal visit to plan that state visit. And we had all this flattery about it being, unprecedented and special. And you could see that this was exactly the kind of language they needed to talk to President Trump. But the situation now is rather different to it being on that day. Things are far harder now than they were last week, even. And it is going to put the king in a rather difficult position unless President Trump pulls back in his approach to Ukraine.
Afua, how does Charles navigate this path then, keeping everyone happy and keeping Trump on side?
It's a very difficult path for him to tread because remember, as well as him being head of state here in the UK, he's also head of state of Canada. And Canada's facing a situation where Trump has said implicitly more than once that he wants to annex Canada, make Canada the 51st state. Now, as the head of state of Canada, the King will act on behalf of what the Prime Minister and what the country wants to do. So the King has a very difficult path to tread because on one hand he is going to have to fulfill the wishes of the Canadian people, which is we do not want to be the 51st state of Canada, and also with the UK and the US to wield that power of soft diplomacy and keep the US sweet. And so that's very difficult because he's going to be directly opposed to something that President Trump has made very, very clear that he wants to do. But the King is, along with Prince William, who definitely is going to be swept into this as well, he's diplomat in chief, absolutely. So it's a really difficult path for him to tread.
So, Sean, your country, Scotland, will be at the heart of all diplomatic efforts because President Trump owns 2 golf courses there. And, of course, famously, his mother was from an island in the Outer Hebrides. So Scotland will be very much integral to all of this diplomacy that we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely will be. And he is fiercely and famously proud of his Scottish heritage. I think in recent times, Scotland, that feeling is not entirely reciprocated here. But I'm quite interested to see how that does unfold because there have been calls and the figures in the Scottish government have been very critical of him and his administration and his rhetoric, especially in recent times. I'm particularly interested to see how that will go. I would like to see Scotland being, I suppose, tactical in their approach because we're facing obviously a period of severe global instability and geopolitical insecurity. And yeah, I think you're right, Scotland will have a fundamental part to play, but just how that's going to unfold, I'm not entirely sure.
We've seen the odd kind of protest when Trump went to Scotland previously, and a lot of people in those areas where the golf courses are, for example, Aberdeenshire in particular, they're not big Trump fans.
No, they're absolutely not, and they were vociferous in their protestations when it came to him acquiring that land and building on it. And ironically, it was the Scottish National Party who had recently come into power. They kind of steamrolled past that and thought it would be economically prosperous, it'd be great for jobs, it'd be great for tourism and putting Scotland on the map in a way. Again, they've kind of dialed back from that. So yeah, I suppose I can't speak for everybody. Personally, am I a fan of Donald Trump? And as I say, his rhetoric, no. I do think that opinion and sort of sentiment is pretty much shared by the majority of the country anyway.
Sarah, when we talk about the second state visit, I was astonished to learn recently Biden, Clinton, Bush, Reagan, Ford, Nixon, JFK, not one state visit amongst that glittering array of American presidents. And Donald Trump is getting 2 state visits and a trip to Scotland to plan the second state visit.
And that was the point that Sir Keir Starmer was really keen to labour during his meeting in the Oval Office, that this was unprecedented, that it was incredibly special. Doesn't this show you, President Trump, just how much we value that relationship? And it is unprecedented. President Trump's last state visit in 2019, welcomed by Queen Elizabeth II. Perhaps the most famous images were of the Donald Trump blimp on the streets of London then. Now, with a new monarch, he has been invited back again. This state visit will not be to Buckingham Palace, it will be to Windsor Castle because the big staterooms at Buckingham Palace are currently under refurbishment. So all state visits until 2027 will be at Windsor Castle. And the pre-visit to take place potentially at Balmoral, the Scottish home of the monarch, the place where the late Queen died, or Dumfries House, King Charles's residence, the project that he has founded there as well. So, I mean, really rolling out the red carpet for President Trump on 2 occasions. But you have to think about the optics of this now, because, yes, for the 24 hours after Sir Keir Starmer's visit to Washington, this all looked great and he'd played a masterstroke. But then we have that awful meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy in the Oval Office. Then we have Trump putting a halt on aid to Ukraine. and then stopping intelligence sharing with Ukraine. And we're putting the monarch in a position now where he has to welcome this man with open arms. And we know King Charles has been a very, very loyal supporter and outspoken supporter of Ukraine. So if that state visit was happening now, it would be extremely challenging.
And Afua, Charles moved very quickly to invite Zelenskyy to Sandringham after the ambush in the White House on the Friday night.
Well, actually, it's advantageous that the summit and the visit to Sandringham was planned before that Oval Office meeting, and it just so happened that that's the way it played out. And like Sarah said, you know, the fact that an unprecedented second state visit is on the table also shows how high the stakes are for the United Kingdom, how desperate we are to avoid a trade war, that we're prepared to roll out the red carpet yet again for President Trump. Like you said, the last one was in 2019 under Queen Elizabeth II, and also that it's not just a state visit. It's an invitation to the hallowed halls of Balmoral, the last resting place of Queen Elizabeth II, who Trump admires so much, and also somewhere, you know, where the royal family have their summer holidays and they invite the Prime Minister, and you know, not a lot of people get to go there. The fact that Trump potentially has been invited there as well is a huge deal. Now, I personally think that Trump would have been angered to see Zelenskyy with King Charles III at Sandringham over the weekend. It wasn't a state visit. It was a meeting. Yes. I mean, I say a simple meeting, but you know, he got there by helicopter. It was with the king. It certainly wasn't a state visit, but you know, Zelenskyy had a 90-minute audience with King Charles III. And I think, you know, that would have definitely put a slight dent in the fact that Trump has had that unprecedented second invitation for a state visit. But it shows us how high the stakes are, that the UK is prepared to roll out the red carpet, spend the money on security yet again. But I think because the rhetoric changed so much in that really fast-moving week of diplomacy, we had Macron there in the beginning of the week, we had Starmer there, then we had Zelenskyy there. I think because the tone has changed so much, I think on Friday, people were a bit like, second state visit, not sure how this is going to go down. Now you've seen newspapers like the Daily Mail, who have been quite supportive of Trump and staunchly supportive of the royal family, asking for that second state visit to be cancelled.
That's unprecedented, Sarah.
Yeah,
isn't it?
and I mean, that would put Britain in a very, very, very difficult position diplomatically to rescind an invitation, particularly one that's been so much fanfare around. But on the point about the King's meeting with Zelenskyy at Sandringham, I mean, that was absolutely vital in order for the King and Britain to show their continued solidarity. No matter what has happened in Washington, we stand alongside you. And that's the message we've had from King Charles all the way through this. And actually from the royal family, if you think back, there was a meeting between the late Queen and Justin Trudeau where she had a big bowl of blue and yellow flowers right at the beginning of
the messaging,
the subtle
optics.
messaging.
Yeah.
Far more outspoken from the King, who's talked about the unprovoked, indescribable aggression by Russia, and even just a week or so ago, visiting a project to help those wounded in Ukraine. So this was his way of showing his continued support for Ukraine, no matter what Donald Trump has had to say about it.
Sean, some might think that the King could be forgiven for wanting to take it easy in 2025. You know, cancer treatment, a very, very stressful family 2 years they've had, really, plus. And now he's in the centre of this huge diplomatic situation where one false move could have huge ramifications for the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people could argue maybe he's earning his money and earning his keep at this point. But I do recognise that, yeah, from a human perspective and a professional perspective, it's a hell of a task for him, and it is a very precarious one to be involved in. And as you say, one false move, one wrong move, one indiscretion, even one comment that's taken the wrong way could see us have a major setback. I think, to give him his credit from a diplomatic perspective, I think he's always carried himself fairly well. I do like that he has been quite outspoken. I think we've seen a bit of a failure from the British government and from Keir Starmer to be as vocal and as condemning as we'd like them to be. And I think it's good to use that soft power, as Sarah and Afua have pointed out. Donald Trump is a great admirer of the royal family, and I think, being the egotist that he is, it may be the thing that gets through to him.
Afia, just on that point about soft power, I mean, the United Kingdom is uniquely placed in the world that a prime minister can turn up in the White House, big drama and theatre, and take the envelope out and what have we got here?
Yeah.
The UK, I mean, is blessed in this respect with the royal family, yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, there isn't many other countries that have that trump card, you know, excuse that pun. And it is one that Keir Starmer was absolutely right to pull out, slam down on the table, you know, the big seal and everything. It's like deal or no deal. And it definitely was, you know, a deal breaker. And also Keir Starmer knows how much, everybody knows how much Donald Trump loves the royal family, you know, loves all that pomp and pageantry, loves that it's going to be applied to him. You know, it gives him that boost, that ego massage that he craves every single day of his life, right? And so, yes, you know, it's vital that the UK has and uses the power of soft diplomacy correctly. But in this instance, now, like we said, you know, the newspapers have been talking about, and the surveys and all sorts about rescinding that invitation. It's something that absolutely cannot happen. And again, you know, like we've been saying, it puts the king in such a difficult position, because now are you welcoming someone to Windsor Castle, to Balmoral, that is on the side of an aggressor in a war where we, the UK, have so staunchly supported the country that's been invaded? Are you inviting someone to Windsor Castle and Balmoral who's trying to annex the country next to them and wielding a trade war on them, so to make it easier to annex them, and also, by the way, we'll just buy Greenland as well? Is this the person that we want to roll out a red carpet for? Does this person deserve that pomp and pageantry?
Sarah, what are you hearing about the logistics of a second state visit? I mean, are we talking weeks, or is this September, October?
I don't think we're talking this year at all,
really?
in fact. And I think that's the purpose for the preliminary invitation to come over here, come and have, you know, a lovely time in Scotland with us, and we'll talk about how this state visit might play out. It's also thought that actually the King will be heading to the USA, Canada next year. And so we could be pushing this back quite a long way in terms of a state visit. But these things take a long time to plan. A US state visit, incoming state visit, really does take a long time to plan.
So what are you talking, 2027?
We could be talking 2026, 2027, potentially, for this state visit. And hence, I think, why they've done this sort of come and have a chat first. We want to welcome you, and then we'll plan it. And obviously, it will be hugely significant, this state visit. And, you know, you get the beast being flown over. An American state visit takes an awful lot of planning. There's an awful lot of people involved. There's a huge amount of security about it. These things don't just happen at the click of the fingers because you need some kind of diplomacy underway at the beginning. This is a long process. They're playing the long game here. Started in the immediate aftermath of President Trump's election, when Prince William was dispatched over to Paris to go and meet him. Then we've had the letter.
Very handsome guy.
Oh, very handsome. And King Charles is a beautiful man as well.
Yeah. Sean, talk me through the popularity of Trump in Scotland then, because is there a risk he comes to Scotland to meet Charles, to plan the second state visit, and maybe one or two protesters turn up with a placard that maybe an American audience might not like seeing?
I think the likelihood of that happening is very high. Scots are not shy, they're not backwards in coming forwards, as a famous Scottish phrase. I don't think they would be aware of the geopolitical ramifications or potential upset that could cause, which ordinarily I would be all for the protests, and I'd be all for freedom of speech and say what you like. And yeah, I'm not particularly keen on Donald Trump being in my country or being in the country of Scotland, but I think what's at stake is far greater than my personal preference or anybody's personal preference. I think that will fall in deaf ears, though. I think you can expect to see people protesting, and I think you can expect to see some funny signs.
Afia, on that point, I mean, it's funny if it were to happen, but this is a volatile president who chops and changes and is dominating global headlines. What's the risk to relations between the two countries if there are significant protests in Windsor, in London, when he comes 2026 or 27?
Well, this is the thing, is that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have said repeatedly that freedom of speech is dead in the United Kingdom. So if there are protests and people with signs, isn't that the UK exercising their freedom of speech? Then freedom of speech is back, and therefore they should be happy about that. That's what they want for us. They want us to have that freedom of speech. So I think people will and should exercise that freedom of speech. But like you so rightly said, we have a volatile president who doesn't remember what he said yesterday. And so definitely, if he comes to the UK and there's protests on the streets, for him, it will be massively disrespectful. And he will take it very personally and will forget everything that has been said about how he wants the UK to have freedom of speech. You know, the double standards and the hypocrisy are massive when it comes to President Trump and when it comes to Vice President J.D. Vance as well. And while I think there actually will be huge protests against this state visit, in Scotland, in Windsor, and there'll also be massive protests in support of Ukraine as well. And he will be very upset to see both of those things, very upset.
Sarah, Charles is a man who has always struck me, struggled for a role in life for many, many years because he was waiting for the inevitable, his mother's passing. And suddenly now he has a huge role.
He has a huge role. And of course, he had a very long run up to it and a long apprenticeship. And so he has been there, done that, seen it all. So meeting leaders whose views you may not align with is nothing new for him. President Trump is by no means the worst that he has encountered and witnessed his mother encountering. And he knows that's part of the job. You've got to turn on the charm. He is a very good listener. He is someone who listens. And we know Trump is someone who likes to talk. Trump is someone with a very thin skin who needs that ego massaging.
Compliments.
Yes, and that is why we had Prince William being dispatched. The King had written to President Trump after the assassination attempt. Melania Trump and the King, it turns out, are pen pals and have been communicating about their shared environmental interests. I did not know that she was an environmentalist, given her husband's beliefs, but it turns out they are. And he loves that relationship, and to be able to say that, he had met the late Queen, for him, those things mean a huge amount. They count for a lot, and that helps to cement that relationship between Britain and the United States.
And just on a personal front, Charles, the cancer treatment, everything he's been through, the two sons not speaking to each other, I mean, this I'm guessing he could have done without.
Except that I think the King wants to get on with the job. He had to take a step back from it at the beginning of his cancer treatment, and he found that deeply frustrating. As you set out, he waited a very long time to start this role, and he knows that given his age, he doesn't have a huge amount of time, unlike his mother, to accomplish all of those things that he wants to get done. So for him, cancer treatment or otherwise, he wants to get on, hit the ground running and do whatever he can. And actually, I think every time you see him out and about, he looks to be in his element, relishing this role. And I think he's surprised many people with just how much aplomb he has shown.
Sean, just to you, if Charles pulls this off and manages to keep everyone on side and Trump engaged, I mean, he'll be up for Man of the Year next year, won't he?
Yeah, I think he'll definitely be deserving of some praise. I just kind of wanted to point out as well, just something that popped into my head if we're talking about, Charles finding it difficult or easy, or how he might find it to engage with people that he's in disagreement with. I believe he did meet or shake hands with the people that may or may not have been responsible for the killing of his uncle, Lord Mountbatten. So I think, it's something that he's been adequately prepared for, and I think he absolutely knows his role as a diplomat. Am I in favour of the monarchy? Absolutely not. But am I happy to see him getting involved in this in terms of these international relations? Yeah, and I think he will be deserving of praise. And I have a feeling that he is going to influence this in a positive manner. So here's hoping, because I think everyone's future depends on it to some degree.
And Afua, just looking ahead then to next year, so there will be the men's FIFA Football World Cup in the United States, Canada, Mexico. It's also the 250th anniversary of American independence. So there is the likelihood that there will be big travel in North America next year for the royal family.
Definitely, like Sarah said, I think it's already been confirmed, hasn't it, that the King will visit primarily because of that 250th anniversary for the United States. So we're going to see a lot happening on the diplomatic stage. It's going to be a huge year for King Charles III, and he will have to stretch his diplomatic chops. Like I said, he is diplomat-in-chief, and Prince William absolutely will be rolled out as well, because Trump and William get on very well. Probably see the Princess of Wales getting out there as well. I think definitely as many people to get involved to make sure that Trump stays on side, because like we said, the UK will do anything at this point to avoid a trade war, but also it's about global stability, right? It's about where we are in this time of geopolitics. It's essential that we wield that soft power of diplomacy in the right way to make sure we stay on the right side of history.
The clock has beaten us, but no doubt we will talk about it again. Afua, Sarah and Sean in Scotland, thank you all so much. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.